One law professor is suing George Mason University. His argument that the mandate is unnecessarily coercive and unconstitutional. The question is, who do the courts side with in these situations? Just to be a bit clear here, the U.S. Constitution allows states to make regulations protecting public health, and enforcing vaccine requirement is usually up to the individual higher education institution. But there's a lot of good questions here. Joining us now is the lead attorney of that case, Jenin Younes. Jenin is with the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Jenin, thanks a lot for taking the time. So your group here has filed this case against George Mason's president and others at the school on behalf of a professor. The professor's name is Todd Zywicki. What exactly is Professor Zywicki arguing here? What should our viewers know?
Thank you so much for having me. Professor Zywicki is arguing that his constitutional rights are being violated by GMU's employee vaccine policy. GMU is currently requiring all employees to get the vaccine, and if they don't, they're subject to disciplinary action. They can seek medical or religious exemption, but you know, it could be quite difficult. So Professor Zywicki is arguing that the policy violates his constitutional rights because it's coercing him into getting a vaccine that he doesn't want to get. And in his case, he's actually arguing that it would be harmful to his health because he has a natural immunity and he has a high level of antibodies because he had COVID. And we have an affidavit from his doctor, Human Nurchasm, attesting that if you have high levels of antibodies or antibodies at all really, and you get the vaccine, it can cause you more harm. So we're arguing that GMU's policy is basically coercing him into doing something that could actually harm him. And so it's violating his rights under the 9th and 14th Amendment to decline medical treatment and to bodily autonomy.
Does your client concede that his natural immunity may run out at some point?
He acknowledges that, and he's been getting antibody tests every couple of months for that reason. He had one as recently as June, which still showed very high levels of antibodies. So it looks as though he's maintaining his immunity.
So if there were a natural immunity exemption, would that be okay? Like if the school were just to allow one more exemption to say if there were some sort of test out there for antibodies, does that meet your threshold?
Yeah, that would be okay. The one problem is that even if this was a recognized medical exemption, which the school has said that is not, they're not going to consider that a medical exemption. One of the problems with that is you still have to wear a mask and socially distance and subject yourself to frequent testing. So you're not treated like a vaccinated employee. So we're arguing that this, the science is so clear that natural immunity is long-lasting and durable, as good as the vaccine immunity. That it's arbitrary, it's irrational, and the government has no interest in coercing Professor Zywicki into getting the vaccine because he's already immune.
So is your argument more broadly that universities can or cannot require students or staff to get vaccines at all?
Well, our argument is very specific. I don't think that we can necessarily say it applies to everybody. For instance, GMU is a public university, so it has to abide by constitutional strictures. Private universities, it's a different situation. It would probably, if you were going to make arguments, it would probably be a different set of arguments, or they'd certainly be tweaked. So Professor Zywicki's specific circumstances, I believe, allow for these arguments.
So how does this fit in, if at all, to existing statewide mandates? I mean, when you're born, if you want to go to school, I mean, I did. I assumed you did as well. We all had to be vaccinated against polio and chickenpox and DTaP and hepatitis B and things like that. And these are statewide mandates. Every state has those mandates in place. If you want to go to school, you have to get those. Are those, in your view, more broadly, whether or not they apply to this case, unconstitutional? Should those be revisited by the court system? Or are you just very specifically, narrowly focused on this particular case?
We're focused on this particular case, and I think students have a different set of concerns. So, Professor Zywicki is a tenured professor. He's been at GMU for 25 years. He's been tenured for 10 years. I'm not saying that, if you've decided on the school of your dreams or whatever, and you've invested in it, I'm not saying it's easy to leave, but this is Professor Zywicki's life and his career. So, the interest of his property interest in this is much higher than students. So that differs, I think, in vaccine requirements. And we've never asked whether, we've never subjected professors, faculty, or employees to vaccine requirements. So it's different. And then I think it's also really important to remember that this vaccine is only authorized under the emergency use authorization statute. So it hasn't received full FDA approval, whereas the other vaccines that you're talking about have.
Absolutely. But that approval could come in the coming months. It depends how long your case comes. And for all we know, Professor Zywicki's immunity may expire, so to speak. I don't have a better word for it, but may run out by the time that there is emergency use authorization now becomes full-on FDA approval. It's a fascinating case, Jenin, and I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by. We're going to follow it very closely, and I wish you and Professor nothing but good health for sure. Jenin Younes, litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance.